In-person early voting for the November 8th election begins October 29th in both New York and New Jersey, but not in Connecticut.
Yeah, it is just one of only 4 states that doesn't have early in-person voting. And CBS 2's Tony Aiello reports critics say that needs to change.
On the November ballot in Connecticut, a vote about early voting. The ballot question reads, shall the Constitution of the state be amended to permit the General Assembly to provide for early voting?
I think it's high time that we had that, no matter what party affiliation that you have.
Right now, all in-person voting in Connecticut must take place on Election Day. Contrast that with Georgia, where early voting is already underway. Georgia mandates at least 17 days of in-person voting before Election Day, far more generous than the 9 days in New York and New Jersey and the 0 days in Connecticut.
It's time for Connecticut to get out of the backwaters of voting rights and open up the ballot for early voting.
Monty Frank founded a third party dedicated to election reform in Connecticut. He believes early voting will pass and allow for greater voter participation.
If they've got a work conflict or a child care conflict on an election day, they can vote early and exercise their rights.
Just get it out the way instead of everybody just having to do it at a set time.
Juliana Goldfluss is contacting voters, urging them to support early voting and finding just a handful of skeptics.
Some people are opposed to it because they think that there would be more fraud, which is silly because you'd be voting in person. You would just be voting before Election Day.
If Connecticut voters say yes, early voting would be in place in time for the 2024 presidential election. In Stamford, Tony Aiello, CBS 2 News.
There is no organized opposition to the early voting effort. Reform advocates also pushing Connecticut to adopt no-excuse absentee ballots and then eventually ranked choice voting, which was used in New York's last mayoral election. To learn more about the upcoming November election, just go to cbsnewyork.com. You can find our Tri-State Voters Guide with early voting dates, polling hours, and much more.